Hello and welcome back to Great American Movie Review. Once again, it's Mikiah here, just going solo on a new release. This will be a non-spoiler review, and today we're going to be talking about the new video game horror film adaptation, Five Nights at Freddy's. Just for a little bit of context, I've never played a Five Nights at Freddy's game. I don't really have any real attachment to this series. I watched its rise and explosion, especially within streaming communities. It has a very large fan base, very dedicated fan base. They made a lot of these games very quickly. And so this review of this movie is coming from the perspective of somebody who has no context for the games really outside of understanding the core concept of you watch these monitors at what is basically evil Chuck E. Cheese as the animatronics come to life and try to murder you. So to me, that seemed like a perfectly good idea for a horror film. So while the games, as far as horror games go, that's just not really something that appeals to me in that way. Horror games that I like are games like Alien Isolation or things like Little Nightmares, maybe some Resident Evil stuff. Nothing quite like, very jump scare oriented. In the case of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, that's kind of their whole thing to some extent. I know that there's more to it, but that is kind of the selling point for sure as far as the horror goes within it. But yeah, I was not necessarily, I'm not going to say this was like my most excited movie for upcoming movie for a while or anything like that, but I was intrigued by it at the very least. It stars Josh Hutcherson. You know him from the Hunger Games series. It's nice to see him back in something, and he gets to lead this movie, and he does a solid job. But yeah, I will say, unfortunately, if you're looking for somebody who likes this movie, this is not the review for you because I did not end up having a very good time watching this, unfortunately. The good things I can say about it, I'll just get out of the way. I think the cast, they're all great. They're doing a solid job within these roles. Like I already said, Josh Hutcherson, he is a character with a younger sister, and he's raising her. There are some traumatic events in his past that he's trying to reconcile, and he's not able to keep jobs very well. And so he ends up just due to needing a job, taking this low paying gig, being a security guard at this Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And that it's, like I said, it's basically an evil Chuck E. Cheese with these animatronics that come to life and walk around. It's pretty, subtle at the beginning, It doesn't just kind of lay its hand out right away of what exactly it's doing. The girl playing his sister, her name's Piper Rubio. She's really great in this movie. We're in a really good period of, I feel like directors finally care about getting good performances out of child actors, because I'm not saying that there weren't good child actors in the past, but in recent years, I have not had nearly as many issues with child performances in films as I used to. And yeah, Piper Rubio, she's great in this as this younger sister. You also have Matthew Lillard in the film, who might be the standout to me. He's the one person who's kind of giving into some of like the campy elements of it, and I liked his presence in the movie quite a bit. I wish there was more of him is all I'll say about that, because his role is pretty limited. The only other really major character is the character of Vanessa, played by Elizabeth Lale, and she's a cop who has some past attachment to the Freddy Fazbear establishment, and her motivations are not completely clear for a while. And that's kind of where I get into a lot of my issues with this movie. It's all in the writing here. I don't know what kind of movie they were trying to make, because it diverts way too much. I feel like you have such a solid, simple premise for a horror movie, a single location kind of thing where you go through, you can start off as subtle as it does, and then it gets progressively worse as these nights keep going on, as the person's being the security guard is being like tortured psychologically by these animatronics that are trying to kill him. Seems like a great idea for a really simple, tight little horror movie, and this movie just doesn't do that. It gives a lot of backstory for your protagonist here that I really don't feel like enhances the story at all. I see what they're going for. It's like they were really trying to have an emotional center to this, but it just doesn't connect. And then they also, which I've heard the games have quite a bit of lore, and that's one of the draws of the game. And the lore here isn't the issue, it's just that they present a lot of information to you way too quickly. And it's just, they bombard you with so much lore, and they just don't put in the effort to really make it work for the movie. It just feels like you're getting a ton of information at once, and it's detracting from the horror aspects of it, which the movie doesn't seem that interested in giving you to begin with. I mean, I don't know if it's because it's a PG-13 film, which is fine. There are some effective moments in here. Not a lot of actual jump scares, which is surprising for a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. There's one particular silhouetted kill that happens that I think works pretty well within the PG-13 limitations, but I think it's effectively done. But they really spend a lot of time outside of the pizza establishment, outside of those actual sequences of being there. Even when they're there, it's mostly about the dreams that are going on with the Josh Hutcherson character, and there's a supernatural element to it too. And for a lot of this movie, I'm just like wondering, like, what is going on? And when they just kind of lay out their cards out, it takes away any of the suspense that was there, and which there wasn't much. There's a legal custody battle subplot happening here. Like, it's way too much. This feels like a horror franchise that's already at its like third or fourth entry, and they're just trying to come up with new angles to keep it going, is what it kind of feels like. And I think that they took the wrong approach here. You start with something simple and then you can keep expanding on it. And sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. That happens in horror franchises. And if it doesn't work, horror fans are very forgiving. And we'll just be like, you know what, that one didn't really work, but they brought it back around for the next one. We've been there before with different franchises. I'm willing to accept some of these things later down the road, but they just didn't create a good foundation here for the actual horror aspect of it, that I wanted to know more about the lore. They just presented me with a lot of backstory and a lot of lore. So yeah, the director here is Emma Tammy. I've not seen any of her independent films, and I don't think that the problem's in the direction at all. I would actually really like to see her continue to be able to make films in whatever capacity she's able to do so. I mean, clearly she's been able to get a few indie projects off the ground to the point where she got a studio project like this, and I don't think the problem's in the direction here. I think the problem really is in the writing, the story, especially just the construction of this adaptation just really just doesn't work at all. And once again, I'm speaking from not a fan of the game's perspective. This is just somebody who's really going into this kind of blind, just knowing the very surface elements of the game. But yeah, those are my general thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's. Are you planning on checking it out this weekend? If you are, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And if you have any insights or thoughts on the movie that are different than mine, or have any like things that you want to let me know about the games, things that the movie may have done well, I'm sure there's plenty of Easter eggs for game fans. And the characters themselves, specifically the animatronics, the Henson Company actually worked on those, and those are incredibly well done. Those practical puppetry and everything, that's all really well done. And so if you're a fan of these games and you just want to see these things brought to this kind of format, then I think you'll still find enjoyment here, even though the movie may be disappointing. It may not be. I don't know. Once again, I'm not a game fan, so I'm just speaking from my own perspective. But this is pretty subpar for a horror movie. There are a lot of kids in my audience. They were giggling through parts of it for sure. I don't know if it's because they knew the game. I know the game has a large, younger fan base demographic. So it might just be trying to appeal to that, and maybe that's why they didn't lean as hard into those horror sequences and gave it more drama and backstory. But I don't know, really. It feels like a missed opportunity to get just something simple and effective out there that you could really make into something. But instead, I think they showed too much of their hand in this movie. But yeah, those are, like I said, those are my thoughts. We have new main show episodes up every Thursday where we go in depth on movies, and I'll keep doing these mini reviews for you whenever a new movie comes out. But thank you for joining me at Great American Movie Review, and we'll see you at the movies.